Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 10:30. I'll call the public safety meeting to order. Becky, would you do roll, please?
I will. Mike Opine,
Here.
Keen Hudson,
Present.
Katie White,
Here.
Angie Shipper,
Here.
Mike Pearson.
Present.
Okay, do we have anybody in the building that's not a county board member? And I don't see anybody.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Has everybody had a chance to read last month's meeting notes? If you have, are there any changes to be made? Anything added or subtracted? If not, minutes will stand approved as submitted. Okay, starting through the department heads. Terry, animal control. Would you like to explain some things? Go ahead.
Can we go by just last name, then I'm last?
Okay, one for you.
No, I'm kidding. Okay, I guess we can do the easy thing first, the graphs. Is there any question on those? Oh, I sound really loud. That's just for April. I'm gonna try and do them monthly instead of quarterly like I was doing.
Go ahead with anything else you have.
Yeah, if I could talk about the vehicle for a little bit. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start.
Okay,
so-
basically what Terry's gonna talk about is strictly for discussion today. There isn't gonna be any action or anything taken. As Terry has stated to that. So the information is going to be just that, information only. So go ahead,
Yeah.
Terry.
And so I think Becky put in your packets, kind of like a worksheet that I did up. I guess it's there on the board, on some different priced vehicles for used and then a new one. I guess my thoughts on that is the used ones, of course, the mileage is going to be higher than Hades. So I'm thinking, things like that might be nickel and diming. So I don't know, your thoughts on that. And then I haven't discussed any like state bid type things. So that new price is just that. It's, that's what the sticker price is. And then the bottom there is just some information that I gathered on when the truck is not in the area. When we take animals to surgery, those days are full days. So we do door to door on the east side of the county. So that takes up, that's like an all day thing. So if on this side of the county, if we had somebody that, like say Dixon PD or the sheriff's department, if they needed us for something, we wouldn't have a vehicle available. And then the day-to-day operations, is just that. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis and need a vehicle for. So if the truck is gone, we can't do any of those things. And not only surgeries, but also when we take animals to rescues or shelters, is the other part of that. I do have a BAR prepared. If my committee is comfortable with forwarding that next month, I guess I'm looking for direction at this point.
Okay. So the sheet that's prepared here and is on the screen right now is basically an explanation of the usage or the need for a second vehicle. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you have 2 employees working?
3 included me, but 3 of us that are full-time.
And both of the other 2 are working every day?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead if anybody else has questions.
I just think that the hours that you provided is helpful for us to look over to be able to make a decision, you know,
Mhm.
comparing it to different departments or hours we've used for other vehicles. And then, my question was, when you guys are on the other side of the county working on stuff, has it happened already or happened often that, you know, the sheriff or Dixon PD put a call into you?
It seems like it never fails.
Oh, okay.
There's always at least one call.
Mhm.
You know, usually it's a loose dog or, you know, so far like an eviction and that hasn't happened, you know, thank goodness. And, you know, the truck that we have is getting some mileage on it. It still runs really well, but I'd like to kind of try to switch out, you know, if we get another vehicle, if that's in the cards, you know, at some point that truck's going to end up being replaced too, at some point. I'm not saying
Mhm.
now, but
Mhm.
so kind of like to rotate.
What's been kind of the protocol if you guys get into that scenario before? Like, how have you handled it?
I usually will take my vehicle.
Mhm. Okay.
I mean, if it's just like a loose dog or something, or, well, usually it's a loose dog.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Sounds good.
I have a quick question. So the numbers for the trips out of county, is that over 3 years?
Yes.
Just a little feedback here. You know, Terry and I have been working on understanding the needs of her department, specifically within the vehicle structures, and what she was trying to, you know, what we're trying to work on is a replacement schedule for the vehicles, and we should really have that for, you know, the departments like the sheriff's department has that, you know, maintenance, Terry's department with animal control. So with this, you know, the request is there's a need for a second vehicle. You know, is it something that the board would want to, you know, have Terry come forth with the board action request for him to purchase a vehicle in this current budget year? Is it something that we can discuss, you know, as a capital investment in our capital budget next year for her? And that's one of those things that, you know, I think is up in the air as well. But I wanted to make sure we talked about getting a replacement vehicle schedule in for her as she's cycling those things through. You know, when you have a vehicle that has a couple 100,000 miles on it eventually and it's rusted out, it'll break down on her, and then we're going to have to do something. So that we're just trying to make sure we prepare and get a couple policies in place.
Terry, I'm looking at this as a specialized vehicle because you're gonna have to equip it. Is there any, do you have any idea how much the cost to equip this vehicle the way that I guess you want it?
Good question. So as you know, with the truck, we had to, because it was a pickup, we had to also purchase an insert. With a van type vehicle, like say that Ford Transit, we have, what we'll do is put our own crates in there, the crates that we already have. So, and another thing, a dog will go in a lower vehicle compared to the truck. The truck sometimes, it's hard for the dogs, they won't jump up in there, and then sometimes they become bitey because you're trying to lift them up and they don't like it. And there was, real quick, a couple of years ago, there was an incident that took me and a Dixon police officer to try to get this dog, number one, out of the apartment. It wouldn't walk for whatever reason. It took both of us to lift that dog into the truck and on rabies poles. And you shouldn't be doing that. But we had no choice. To try to lift that dog up in the truck, he would have turned and bit one of us. And we did get him up there. It wasn't pretty, but it's just those kinds of things that remind me that sometimes when they don't want to jump up in there, it's easier to put them in a van type vehicle. We wouldn't have to. We have all our equipment. We have enough that we can put, you know, a rabies pole in there. We'll have enough for that and the truck. And like I said, we would put crates in there. So a big crate for a big dog, one or two smaller ones, depends on the size, we could put in there for other dogs or cats.
Okay, now, I'm going back. You utilized the use, I call it mutual aid from DeKalb County in an incident earlier this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Uh,
Well, I think
How-
it was last year, but yeah.
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 How often have you had a so-called need for that?
It's not too often. And the reason she came over, she was very willing to come to us. I offered to just meet her with the crate or a trap, I mean, just because I don't have a trap that would have been big enough for that dog. At some point, I'd like to make what they call a Missy trap. And it's just basically made out of fence with, it's very, I don't, it's simple, yeah. It's very simple to make, and I think it would benefit at some point, but yeah, and that's why she came over, and they're very helpful. And that's when I saw her van, which I knew they had those. But they got the same thing in their crates that they use, and they can take them out if they need to put like a bunch of they go to eviction or someplace, a hoarding situation, they can put in a bunch of small crates.
Okay,
The
thanks.
truck, I can't.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mike, anything?
I think he's frozen.
You're muted, Mike. There you
Sorry,
go.
my reception, it's very, very glitchy.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay, any questions for Terry for animal control on your part? Okay, I'm understanding no, shake your head no if you don't have any questions.
Nope.
All right, thank you. Terry, in reference to your question as far as the board action report, I would suggest you go ahead and turn it in because that's basically the procedure,
Mhm.
and we'll take it through its channels that way.
Okay,
Okay?
sounds good. Thank you. everyone.
Unless the administrator has a different direction.
No, it's two directions. It's either, there's a submission of the board action request form for the purchase in this fiscal year because it's not in the budget, or we wait until, the budget sessions and hearings and put it in next year's budget. So it's either way. I think the county's, we know it's a need for her department. So I think we would be in our best interest just to move forward with it if there's a direction that we desire.
Okay, if you do need help on filling the form out, Jeremy can help you. I will be glad to try and help you. Any one of us will be trying, we'll be glad to try and help you. So just let us know if you haven't made one out already.
Yep, I've got it.
Okay, all right.
I've got a question for Administrator. Now, if I got this understood, there's not money in our budget for it this year?
No, I mean, it just wasn't budgeted this year
Okay.
per se. Now, I'm not
So-
saying there's not money in the budget, but this wasn't a budgeted
Okay,
item,
so if need be, we go for next year.
if that's your desire. So
Yeah,
again,
okay.
with it being $20,000-ish, the board action request form is necessary for her, to be submitted to get it purchased in this budget year because it wasn't a previously budgeted item.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Terry? Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. I'm not gonna call you the wrong name today because it's on my paper.
Thanks.
Amy, you're
Morning.
up. Go ahead.
So the circuit clerk's office is still in the process of searching for a new case management system. We're gonna narrow it down hopefully by July. We have been doing demos. We have a couple of more coming up. Kevin is gracious in letting us use his room. It works very well over there at the courthouse. So I want to thank him for that. So June, July, I'm hoping to have an answer if we're going to be switching or sticking with what we have. I also want to let you know that our office recently signed up for Inlingo, which is a language services provider. They have interpreters, translators with over 150 different languages. We use that now in the courtrooms. The judges use them. And they can either dial in or by video, depending on what kind of hearing it is. So it's very convenient if somebody comes in for a basic traffic ticket and we can't communicate with them, they'll just go into our resource room, call an 800 number, put in the PIN number for our office, say what language they need. We can sit right there with them and help them do what they need done. So that's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Amy?
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I appreciate
you.
it. Okay, moving on, we don't have anybody for the coroner, judges, or public defender. EMA, Mr. Lally.
Good morning. I'll make it real quick. The federal government's come out with a new project for us to do. It's called NQS, National Qualification System. Anyone operating in the EOC must go through a training, must go through a task book, be checked off. If we don't do that, it's simple. We just don't get federal funding. So that'll be my next project I'm working on. So if you have any questions about that, we can discuss.
Are you
it.
teaching?
I probably will have to. Yes, sir.
I thought maybe you should be running it. You've been around a little while. So, all right, any questions for Kevin regarding the EMA? Okay, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Moving on, probation. Stacy.
We recently had a training in which we utilized the EOC. So thank you to Kevin for letting us use that. It's always a nice accommodation for us to have that space available, and the technology that's in there is up to date and current, and always we have great connection in there as well. So thank you. We appreciate it. That was a training for probation officers and some educators throughout Northwest Illinois, in which the training topic was trauma. Another thing that we've got going on is we have another drug court graduation coming up on June 5th, which you are welcome to attend. That will be in Judge Ackert's courtroom. That's on a Wednesday. It's slated to take place at 4 o'clock. We have one person that is graduating that day, June 5th. And that's all that I have.
Okay, thanks, Stacy. Anybody have any questions for Stacy? If you haven't attended a drug court, shouldn't call it a program, but an activity, it's definitely worth your while to go over and sit in on one. I keep saying I'm going to do it. I've already done it once, but that's so far back I can't remember when it was, but it's worth your while if you've got about an hour to go over and see and maybe hear what these individuals have been so good to stick with. And just maybe, hear a little bit from them as far as the struggle, the difficulty that they have, excuse me, on attaining the goal of completion of the program. It's well worth it. So if you got a chance to go over, please do so. Okay, thanks, Stacy. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see. County Administrator, Jeremy, would you like to report on abandoned property focus group? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Let me back up just a minute. I've skipped over a couple because I knew they weren't going to be here, but the sheriff is busy and cannot be here today. He has submitted his report and all the details, and they are available through the packet and on the internet. Okay. Mr. Boonstra, State Attorney's Office.
Not too much to report to you this month. I had an opportunity to go over to Sauk Valley Community College and meet with some of their criminal justice students and kind of explain what my office does there and how we interact with law enforcement. It was a good opportunity to sit down and see some of the folks that hopefully will come back to our community and grow their careers in criminal justice. As Amy was talking about the case management software, we're eagerly anticipating where she's going to go with, and hopefully what the county board will provide. As it interacts with our office, we want to make sure that we're able to work seamlessly with her office in terms of filings and and making sure that we get updated ROAs through the circuit clerk's office. We also are piggybacking off of the sheriff's report. As you can see in there, there's been a couple arrests that have been produced through his report. And as you'll notice on one of them, was several firearms that were included that, again, as a product of the Safety Act, we were unable to hold that person. And you get to see some of the Pretrial Fairness Act at work.
Any other questions for Charlie? Okay, if not, thanks, Charlie. I appreciate it. Okay, Jeremy, I apologize for dropping you and going backward instead of forward. Go ahead if you'd like to on the focus group.
Yeah, so the focus group met last week. We had Attorney Zollinger come in, as well as State's Attorney Boonstra, and discuss with our departments, a few of our board members, and actually a few village representatives from around the county to discuss on, the legal process of going to the next phases of dealing with some of our nuisance and abandoned properties issues. From our zoning to health departments, we have some violations, code enforcements, things that we could go out and start moving that process forward. The issue is that we sometimes get blocked and we don't know where to go from there, as we're not getting any sort of resolution or solutions with these property owners. So State's Attorney Boonstra and Attorney Zollinger came in and was really able to work with us and the departments to understand what the next steps are, what the next steps in the legal process are for us to either acquire the properties as a county or to go through different, judicial processes to make sure we could get some action. So it was very great, phenomenal learning experience. I think all of us there has a better understanding of how to start processing these, since there is a pretty substantial list and it keeps growing every day. I feel like we get a new call or an email saying, hey, what about this property? So very excited to keep things moving forward and working with these property owners on, again, getting a resolution to the issues at hand. Any questions on the focus group?
As you guys go along and are, doing this work, are you documenting out what the process looks like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, I mean, that's a key piece of this. So each department, between the zoning department and or the health department has to have a pretty in-depth file on these residences or commercial properties with violations, notices, things that have been sent out, and then that helps us go through the next steps. But yeah, there's a documented file in place.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
And you to add to that, if you're in question also on any individual property, excuse me, generally there's photographs taken and there's a separate procedure for each property depending on what category they fall into. So health department may be the only one that deals with one and may take it in one direction. Sheriff's department may be the other department that takes care of something and it may go in a different direction. So it's kind of tailor-made, and we've done this through Jeremy's assistance, and where one department, zoning, for example, can go so far, they kind of hit a hurdle and it's undecided on which way to take it. Do we go to the sheriff's department? Do we come back to zoning? Do we go to the health department? So it's not a verbatim thing. It's a basic layout of what we do. So, or how we get the properties brought to our attention. We do keep a list on the properties and we have priorities as to which ones we approach. Keep in mind though, that money received in any grants at this point are strictly for residential properties, not commercial properties. So if it's something like a school, or we have property down on Eldina Road that is not, private residence. So we're dealing with all of them and putting them in place and prioritizing which ones we want to approach first. But we can only work as far as the action end of it is with residential properties. So Do you have anything you want to add to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, so again, the departments are doing their due diligence now. The health department, zoning department, they're working with these lists plus on a daily basis. But again, as Mr. Copine had stated, the Strong Communities grant that we have, which is roughly $77,000 that the county has for use, and that is specific towards residential properties. And there's also some restrictions on that. So single family, no more than 4, units in there. If it is a home that is rented out, it is only to be used for acquisition or demolishment and some abatement. And those properties either have to be turned back into single family use or into green space or park use. So, there's some criteria there, but $77,000 isn't going to go very far. That's why we're also trying to prioritize the homes that we're going to go after with those dollars, but working with the villages and other municipalities to try to access, what funds they might have to help with the process. The county does have some other funds that are set aside to assist with this that were, designated last year, I do believe, or at the beginning of this fiscal year. And, I think there's about $60,000 left aside for that. That is not necessarily as restricted as the 77,000. But again, that maybe six homes out of the entire bucket, 6 to 7 homes, depending upon what the payment schedule looks like. The problem is on a commercial aspect, we don't have the funds for that. That's a pretty big commitment. So we're trying to work with some recycling companies that come out, they do demolishment of big structures, and they actually recycle the different materials for reuse. And that takes away a lot of our cost. Any other questions? Perfect.
Any other questions on the abandoned buildings or collapsed or whatever? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jeremy. I have nothing under unfinished business, new business. I'll turn it over to Jeremy again. Opioid funding request discussion only.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, the county is part of the opioid settlement process, and we do have some distributions. To date, we have about $78,000 in the settlement fund in our ledger, and it's really unscheduled. We might get a notice that we should get a distribution. Does not necessarily mean we have the distribution. We found that out a couple times. Charlie gets those notices. He sends them over to myself and the treasurer's department downstairs, and we're like, oh, all right, great. We get another $15,000, should be arriving anytime. Well, it doesn't happen. So therein lies an issue with making sure that we're dispersing these dollars appropriately. And so we've had a couple of requests, one from a group called Partnership for a Healthy Lee County. It's a substance disorder work group. They submitted a request before I was in this role. And we've worked with them on kind of evolving that request a few times. And then Mississippi Centers as well has submitted a request for us to partner with them as they look to build another recovery home within the county, which is a large need. They get our recovery homes are continued to be full almost at different times with folks from the county, with folks from outside the county. They have, they can't turn, people down per se as if they have a bed. There is a process to that, but they are looking at adding another recovery home, a 10-bed recovery home to the county, which we were excited to look at and talk to them about. So I wanted to discuss this a little bit because we're trying to figure out how we could fund both, or fund one, because there's limited resources coming in at the moment. The Partnership for a Healthy Lee County substance abuse, disorder work group is requesting essentially around $20,000 in total for their fund. And they have a plan that they submitted to us, and that is a prevention section where they are dealing with an anti-stigma initiative. That initiative would provide community training and curriculum for 2 instructors. They would have 2 community trainings with those instructors, and then they'd actually do surveys and data collection with that. There are some supplies to that. Public awareness campaigns, both on some billboards, radio, standard media, as well as, working with lots on some branding for them. And then they have a couple other pieces to that. So the way that would go is, they'd be working on these branding and marketing initiatives to make sure that it's really working on a stigma and anti-stigma initiative, as well as doing some things like One Box, which is an emergency opioid overdose reversal and rescue kit, and having some of those placed throughout the county. So it's a great thing, except for we need to understand, hey, we have X amount of funding. How do we spend that? And how do we spend it now while we have it and into the future? So there's some priorities that we need to discuss on how we're actually going to process this piece of it, which is that request, which essentially some of those things could be done. They could bill the county directly. We could, then take care of those invoices from the selected, providers. With Sinisippi Centers, their request is essentially about a $270,000 request over 5 years. And that's to assist in the startup of the recovery home, some of those upfront costs, operational costs upfront until they are able to get sustainable. And typically, it seems like they could become sustainable within that 2 to 3 year process. So we'd help them out upfront, and it would start to wean off towards the end of that lifeline. Again, the issue is we have $78,000. We don't know when the funds are going to come in. There's no schedule to these things. One day we might have $30,000 dropped in our lap. 3 months later, we might have nothing in that gap time, and we might have $10,000. So part of the discussion with Sinisippi is, and I'm, with Stacy Kemp, and I know she's been at a conference for the last 2 days, and hopefully I get on a call with her later this afternoon to discuss this, is if we do some of the funding towards the Partnership for a Healthy Lee County initiative, which is a smaller request, it's not a long-term request, and then we say as a board, hey, we want to support Sinisippi Centers and another recovery home process. This $270,000 is something that we're able to commit to as funding comes in. We won't be able to say, hey, we have $75,000 for you right now if we don't have $75,000 for you right now. So it's one of those things that we need to make sure that Sinisippi is able to actually get the funding they need to keep this going, knowing that we can commit to these funds as the funds come in from the settlement. But it's going to be unknowing what that schedule looks like might hinder their process as well. So it sounded like from the financial folks here at the county, from some of the exec team and the Treasurer's Department, and working with State's Attorney Boonstra and Stacy Stewart and Judge Ackert and Kathy Ferguson, so there's a big group that's trying to keep these funds moving forward, because we haven't done anything with them yet. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about that, see if you had any questions. When the funding request actually comes through, it's going to come through this committee first, and then it will end up going to finance or exec, and then moving forward. So I wanted to talk about the different requests that are on the table, what those things are. I do have a couple pages we could, get into deep dive a little bit further if you want to, but I just wanted to generally talk about it, and make sure that you knew what the requests were, what might be coming out. What I would like to have is when we get a clear understanding of how these funds can be, or not necessarily can be spent, but if like Sinisippi's on board with knowing, hey, we could commit to 270, but it might be on an unscheduled basis. If they're good with that, I want Stacy Kemp to come and present to this committee and then move forward. But we're not prepared. We're not ready yet.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with the program. Where are these funds coming from?
So these funds are coming from an opioid settlement. It's a class action federal lawsuit. Charlie might be able to speak more on it than I, but essentially this is disbursements from different lawsuits across the country, with Walgreens and different providers and different places where you can get drugs, and it's an opioid settlement. I think they started distributing these funds last year. A year and a half. Okay. So, I mean, think about that in that perspective. So it's been about 2 years. We've only had $78,000 in 2 years so far.
I'm not following.
Well, Charlie could speak on
And
the
there's-
settlement process a little bit more.
In a general term, that's basically what it is. But I mean, there's billions of dollars that are being dispersed throughout the country. So because we signed on to the opioid litigation that occurred 2019, maybe a little bit before that, it is across the entire nation. It's not just specific to Lee County or even the state of Illinois. It's specific against all of these distributors based on the issues that have come up. And I encourage you to take a look at it. There's a couple different documentaries that are out there that kind of go through how this all began and how the opioid crisis came to be. So what it is that we are all part of a conglomerate, and it's a lawsuit that is nationally being conducted, and it's in different areas of the United States. Now, as different defendants are going through the process of either bankruptcy, settlement, whatever it may be, there are settlements that are agreed upon based on that conglomerate that all sign on and say, yes, we're okay with that. And we have our own attorney that gets involved in that because I can't get a part of a class action that's going to be in New York right now. So as that happens, we sign on and agree to certain settlements. We agree to amend our complaints on certain defendants. And then as that goes through, you get put into the scheduling. And I say scheduling because it sounds like that's what's going to be, oh, you're going to get this in January, you're going to get that in February. What I mean by scheduling is it's a schedule of how much each municipality, county, state gets based on that settlement. And we can provide you with what that looks like per settlement as well. I think I sent over 3 or 4 different ones that have come through the pike. And it gets you very much so narrowed down to we're getting 0.0035% of whatever the settlement may be because there are so many involved.
Mhm.
And then what that looks like is maybe from the settlement, you're going to get 50,000, 75,000 over a period of 10 years or so.
Okay. Okay, so our community ended up with a drug problem because of how this was handled. And now there's been a huge lawsuit against these groups.
Several lawsuits against
Okay.
different distributors.
So now when we get the money, is it stipulated how we have to spend it?
Correct. And the Attorney General's office for each state has been the conduit for how that's going to be and what that's going to look like. So it basically has to be spent towards the remediation of the opioid crisis.
Okay. And Jeremy, how I interpreted the first group that wants to get the 20,000 is to basically combat stigmas of people that ended up with drug addiction problems.
I think it's more towards combating the stigmas towards that and the reduction strategies of drug use. So they're trying to tackle the drug use issues through different, trainings, marketing, initiatives and things like that.
So would theirs be more front end focused than back end focused, for example, where you have beds for people that are, okay.
Yep.
And then with the later group that wants like the 10-bed center, has that been talked about with the community? I don't know where it's going.
So right now, this, I'm sure that they've discussed it on a broader level, but, we have 2 recovery homes through Sinisippi, a men's home and a women's home. I think one's in Dixon, the men's and the women's homes in Amboy. So through their needs, this was something that's been talked about for quite some time where they knew that there's a need for another recovery home. They're going towards to try to make this happen anyway. We would be a big part of that process, knowing that there's some funds available to help offset some of their upfront costs. So I don't know on if they've gone out and talked about this, at different, town halls or anything like that. But, this has been a constant conversation for multiple years.
So to kind of piggyback off of what he's saying, we've met a couple times, like he was talking about the proposals that came through. Myself, I think Chairman Olson was there for the last one. Stacy's been a part of it, Judge Ackert. And I think it's important to note too that the health department being involved too. I think it's important to note that Judge Ackert, Stacy, who've been a part of the drug court since, what was it, 2006? 2005, yep. And I don't want to put words in Stacy's mouth, but we've really seen a real need for a recovery home, like's been discussed with the Amboy one, because it wasn't just that we are utilizing those homes. It's an area focus. I mean, Whiteside County is using it as well. Ogle County is using it as well. And sometimes when we have folks that are coming through the drug court, we just don't have a place that we can place these people. So that's really been the focus of, again, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I guess Stacy and Judge Ackert, myself, of where we need to look at, because if we don't have that first part, everything else, just putting a flyer out there for what the stigma may be, is going to be pointless because we can't help.
So speaking of that other, more of a regional approach, what's the data show with like how much of the problem is, for example, Lee County versus Whiteside, Ogle, whatever it is? Does it make sense where we're wanting to put it versus where people are coming from?
I don't know that I can give you specific numbers as what the data is, but what I can tell you is that there are Cook County is even sending people out there or asking to send people out to the Amboy homes here. There's some preferential treatment given to the folks that are around here because that's what's being funded for, is people in our area, but they still have to take those applications based on where the funding is at. Now, when we look at the approach from Ogle, Whiteside, Carroll, whatever it may be for Lee County, we have to keep in mind too that Sinisippi, as they look to have a recovery home available, they can't say this is going to be specifically just for one county. And that was something that was raised before too. Can we pool the money to be able to have these different counties together so that we can have a recovery home here? And I think very selfishly, and I don't blame anybody for it, everybody wants to have it in their county so that it's easier and more accessible for the folks in their county. So that's some of the hurdles that we're trying to go over. And I think as Jeremy was saying too, it's kind of early on right now. It's something that we're trying to work through, especially as we try to get the idea of how much money is going to be coming through.
I think, so you said everybody wants it in their county. Does that mean citizens that are in the homes want it in their county, or does that mean like the
service providers that are, so if you have like Ogle County's drug court and they want to have a recovery home there so that they can send people from their drug court to a recovery home there, they want to have it in their backyard rather than having to send them over to Lee County, just for logistical sakes and in terms of transportation.
Okay, thank you.
If I can talk about need for just a few minutes. Most often time, the men's recovery home through Sinisippi is full to capacity. With drug court, we have a referral process for all of those people that we screen and decide if they're appropriate for drug court. 2 weeks ago, we had 3 people that we were waiting for a bed at the recovery home for the men's recovery home. So when we don't have a bed available, that leaves those people in our community more at risk to continue to use. If we can get them in that environment that's a little bit more stable and more secure through the recovery home, that's where we prefer to have them. That's where we can start treatment and expedite that treatment process with those individuals. From that recovery home, they are in an environment where they're receiving treatment immediately. They have staff that is there throughout the daytime. We're getting them to court, to the probation appointments, to their support meetings, to treatment. And then also from there, they're, once they complete treatment, they'll do aftercare services, and then they're able to continue to live at that recovery home and go to work. So that's just a stable and secure environment for those individuals within our community. We've utilized those recovery homes for a number of years. When Amboy was, when they were looking to put the one in Amboy, they did present to the city council. I did go to that meeting, and I know they presented very well to the council meeting before that home opened there. And that was the more recent home to open.
And just to piggyback on that, in some notes that Stacy Kemp had provided, on average, they're looking at least 10 individuals a month on a wait list within their men's home alone. So, and since 2018, they've supported over 123 individuals in the recovery process, which is pretty significant. So adding a second home, just think about being able to continue to help folks within that recovery process and get them back into, role within our community or their community that they can be productive and continue on their journey.
Any further questions? Thanks, Stacy, for your input. Charlie, Jeremy, appreciate it.
Yeah, so just again, to follow up, look forward to next month to have probably some presentations from each of these respected groups. I just wanted to give you, I didn't want to have someone show up today and then everybody be like, wait, what are we talking about? So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of background, and we'll continue to work on that process.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Angie, seconded by Keen. All those in favor signify by saying yay.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.